In the summer of 2022, an international marine research team ventured into the heart of the Indian Ocean to study an area known as the Chagos Abyssal Plain, one of the deepest, most uncharted regions of the ocean. Led by Dr. Anika Mekra, an ambitious marine biologist, the team consisted of seasoned oceanographers, engineers, and geologists who were all eager to uncover the secrets of the deep. What they didn't know was that the abyss had been hiding something that had been waiting. The mission's focus was to deploy advanced ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, and collect samples from depths where no human had ever ventured before. Dr. Mekra's particular interest was in discovering new life forms in these lightless depths. She had spent years of her life preparing for this moment. The journey began as planned. The research vessel, Shanti, was equipped with the latest technology, and after days of preparation, they lowered the first ROV down into the pitch-black water. The descent took hours. Miles below the surface, the ROV finally reached the ocean floor, a place devoid of light, where the pressure was enough to crush any unprotected object in an instant. They began scanning and recording. On the first night, the problems started. The crew was woken by strange noises reverberating through the ship. At first, they dismissed it as the natural sounds of the ocean, the creaks of the ship, pressure settling. But soon, the noises grew more distinct. It was a low, rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat, but coming from beneath the surface. It reverberated through the hull, like a distant drum. Dr. Mekra decided to investigate. The ROV was recalled, and when they examined the footage, they found something bizarre. At a depth of 15,000 feet, the camera had captured brief flashes of movement, unnatural, fleeting shadows that darted across the ocean floor. But when they slowed the footage, the shadows didn't resemble any known creature. They looked human. Twisted, distorted figures with long arms and legs, writhing in the abyss. But no one could explain what it was. The data was inconclusive, so they dismissed it as an optical illusion, interference from the equipment. The next night, however, the heartbeat returned, louder. It pulsed through the ship, rattling the crew. Some of the researchers complained of headaches, strange dreams, whispers in the dark. The temperature in the vessel seemed to plummet, even though they were in the tropics. It felt as if the abyss itself was seeping into their minds. By the third night, the crew was on edge, but Dr. Mekra was insistent they continue. They sent the ROV deeper, pushing it to its limits, and what it found was something no one could have prepared for. At 18,000 feet, the camera feed cut in and out, but when it stabilized, they saw an enormous structure, an unnatural formation on the ocean floor. It looked like a temple, ancient and crumbling, its stone walls covered in strange, bioluminescent symbols. It shouldn't have been there, nothing should have been there. This deep, there was no life, no light, and yet, the structure pulsed with energy, the same rhythm that echoed through the ship. The ROV hovered closer, scanning the exterior, when the camera picked up something horrifying. A figure, tall and gaunt, stood at the entrance of the temple. It was humanoid but wrong, its skin was translucent, eyes hollow and black, and its limbs moved in slow, jerking motions, like it was adjusting to the gravity of the abyss. Then the figure turned, staring directly into the camera, and the feed cut to static. Panic gripped the crew. Dr. Mekra ordered the ROV to be retrieved immediately. As they pulled it up, the pulsing sound grew deafening, like the heartbeat of some ancient beast, shaking the ship violently. Crew members started reporting hallucinations, visions of the figure, of the temple, of countless others like it emerging from the abyss, whispering in languages no one could understand. When they finally recovered the ROV, its cameras were shattered, and the body of the machine was covered in deep, claw-like scratches. Then the whispers began. No one could pinpoint where they were coming from. It was like the ship itself was speaking. Faint, unintelligible voices, growing louder with each passing hour, as if something was trying to communicate, or lure them in. Some of the crew began to lose their sanity. One of the engineers, a man named Vikram, locked himself in the engine room and refused to come out. When they finally broke in, they found him scribbling the same glowing symbols from the temple all over the walls, muttering that they were coming. Dr. Mekra realized they had to leave. The deeper they stayed, the worse it got. But as they prepared to abandon the mission, something slammed into the side of the ship with a force that nearly knocked them overboard. The water around the vessel began to churn violently, as if something massive was stirring beneath them. And then, without warning, the lights on the ship went out. In the pitch-black darkness, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. And for the briefest moment, illuminated by a flash of lightning outside, the crew saw them, figures, just like the one from the RAF, climbing up the sides of the ship, hundreds of them, their hollow eyes fixed on the crew. The last log entry recovered from Shanti was from Dr. Mecker herself. In it, she simply wrote, "We weren't the first to find it. And we won't be the last." The vessel was discovered adrift weeks later by a passing cargo ship. No one was aboard, and all communication equipment had been destroyed. The RAF, along with its data, was missing. The authorities deemed it a tragic accident, but the real truth was buried beneath miles of ocean. The abyss doesn't forget those who disturb its slumber. Part 2. Months passed since the Shanti went missing. The official reports declared it a catastrophic failure of equipment, chalking it up to the unpredictable conditions of the Indian Ocean. But the rumors spread fast. Everyone in the marine research community whispered about the ship's last, eerie transmissions and the strange, distorted sounds that had been intercepted by satellite before the vessel went dark. Yet the world moved on, as it often does with tragedies that occur far out of sight. But for Dr. Marcus Red, a former colleague of Dr. Annika Mekra, the disappearance haunted him. He had been part of the original team until he was pulled from the mission at the last minute due to an unrelated emergency back on land. If not for that twist of fate, he, too, would have been aboard Shanti. The obsession gnawed at him. What had they found at those impossible depths? What had really happened? Weeks of sleepless nights led him to a decision: he had to go back. There were no survivors, no clear answers, but something deep in his gut told him the answers were still down there, lying beneath the black waters of the Chagos Abyssal Plain. By the end of the year, Marcus had assembled a new crew, a smaller, hand-picked team of deep-sea specialists. Most were reluctant, their nerves already frayed by the ominous tales surrounding Shanti, but Marcus was persuasive. He convinced them that they were on the brink of a major scientific breakthrough. "If we don't go back, someone else will," he said. Their ship, the Mariner, was smaller but equipped with updated tech, more robust rafts, and a more experienced crew. As they approached the coordinates of Shanti's last known location, the unease settled over the team like a fog. Even the most hardened sailors found themselves glancing out into the dark waves as if expecting something to rise up from the depths. Dr. Red remained resolute. His nightmares had grown worse the closer they got to the site, but he refused to acknowledge them. Instead, he focused on preparing the equipment. This time, they would stay only long enough to gather data and return. No risks, no overextensions. On the second day, they arrived. The ocean was eerily still. No sign of Shanti, not even wreckage floating in the water. But there was a strange calm, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Red ordered the first raft to be deployed. It descended slowly, sending live footage to the ship. The team crowded around the monitors as the feed streamed in, dark, murky water, sediment swirling like dust in a forgotten tomb. At first, the dive seemed uneventful. The abyss stretched out like an infinite black void, the pressure so intense that even the most experienced members of the crew seemed anxious. And then, the raft hit the ocean floor. Nothing but endless, grey silt. They began scanning the area, hoping to locate the strange temple structure Dr. Mecker had reported. The minutes ticked by. The pulse in the ship, that same rhythmic thud that Dr. Mecker's team had recorded, returned. Louder, more insistent. Everyone heard it. Marcus, trying to calm the nerves of the crew, reasoned it away as seismic activity. But he knew that was a lie. An hour passed. Then, suddenly, the RAF sonar picked up something ahead, a large object. They moved closer. As the cameras adjusted, it came into focus, the wreck of Shanti. The ship sat in eerie silence on the seafloor, partially crumpled, its hull twisted and torn apart like a child's toy. It didn't look like it had been sunk by natural causes, something had crushed it from above. The crew aboard the Mariner fell silent. There was no sign of life, no bodies, just the ghostly remains of the ship. Marcus ordered them to keep going. He had come for the temple, not the wreck. The raft pressed on, and after another few hundred feet, it appeared. There, rising from the silt like a forgotten relic of a lost age, was the temple. Even on the grainy camera feed, it was impossible to mistake, the glowing symbol still shimmered faintly across its surface, casting an unnatural light that seemed to pulse in sync with the heartbeat that now reverberated through the Mariner. The crew's anxiety grew palpable. They all felt it, an oppressive presence in the depths, a weight that pressed against their minds as much as their bodies. Marcus stared at the monitor, his breath shallow. The symbols! He had seen them before, in his dreams. He had scribbled them absent-mindedly on papers during sleepless nights. Now, seeing them in real life, his blood ran cold. The raft hovered at the temple's entrance, the same one that had swallowed Shanti's final moments. For a few tense minutes, nothing happened. Then the whispers began. Faint at first, just a trickle of static through the audio feed, but soon they grew louder, voices overlapping, speaking in an ancient, guttural tongue. The crew on board exchanged nervous glances. Some clutched their heads, wincing as if the voices were piercing their skulls. "We need to pull back," the raft operator stammered, his hands trembling over the controls. But Marcus didn't listen. He leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes wide with fascination and dread. The temple called to him, its symbols swirling in the fog of his mind. He ordered the raft to enter. As the camera crossed the threshold, the feed flickered violently. For a moment, they lost all visual. Then the screen stabilized, revealing an interior that defied explanation, walls covered in those same glowing symbols, but something else. Movement! Dozens of pale, twisted figures skulked through the shadows, like ancient marionettes suspended in dark water. They crawled along the walls, dragging themselves toward the camera with jerking, unnatural motions. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "Pull it back!" he shouted suddenly, snapping out of his trance. But it was too late. A distorted face appeared in the feed, its hollow eyes locked onto the camera, its mouth opening in a silent scream. The screen cut to static. Then, without warning, the lights on the Mariner flickered and went out. In the pitch-black silence that followed, the whispers became deafening.